Welcome back to Solitude Studios. I'm DJ Hero, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you just a simple trick on how to make a mono sound stereo, full, wide, bright, and filling out the mix completely. I know there are a lot of ways to do things, and the main thing we want to pay attention to and really kind of compensate for and to take into consideration is it is easy to make something wide, but we don't want to do that at the risk of losing it in the mix on a mono system or a janky PA. So in this tutorial, I'm just going to break down the simple way that I do things. First things first, I've got my Waves PAZ frequency analyzer up here to show us the width. I've got a little loop here, and on the loop I have just the basic Korg M1 piano. The Korg M1 classic keyboard from the 90s gave us a bunch of really staple sounds that I'm sure you've heard if you go back and listen to any dance tunes from the early 90s, maybe even the late 80s. I'd have to do the research on the exact dates. But just a great keyboard, great classic piano sound. But you can see it is completely mono. And the synth itself, because of its age and what it's designed to do, doesn't have a way to make it wide. So first things that we're going to do is I'm going to add an EQ to the channel. And just to back up a little bit, I'm going to be using a lot of plugins that are not native to Ableton. If you don't have the plugins, that's okay. The native plugins that come stock with Ableton will all do the exact same thing. I'm just kind of stuck in my ways and will do things the way that I do them. In this particular case, I have the FabFilter Pro Q3, which I feel is the best EQ on the market right now. And the first thing I'm going to do once I've got the EQ added is I'm going to stage the gains here so that we're not clipping at all. And you can see that we're breaking past 0 by about 4 decibels. So I'm going to give myself a little overhead, bring that down to 6, close that out. And then the next step, once it's highlighted, I'm going to hit Control G. That'll create our chain. The first thing I'll do here on this one, and we'll just call this main. I'm going to duplicate it so that we have a second one to work with, and we'll call this stereo. Perfect. Now on the stereo side, we don't need the full spectrum of sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll off a lot of the low end here. We'll bring that up like around that. We'll mute the main so that you can hear it. You can hear it's a lot thinner. Sounds a bit tinny. Great place to start. Close that out. Now, to get that wide sound, what we need to do is have one ear hear the sound at a slightly different time than the other ear. What mono sound is, and the easiest way to explain it, is both ears are hearing the signal at the exact same time, and the brain is processing that as one signal, which is where we get our mono sound. However, if we offset the time that one ear hears the sound than the other ear, now the brain's interpreting that as two different signals. So the easiest way and the best way to do it is to just grab the stock Ableton delay, add that, and I'm actually going to make it before the EQ. I'm going to make it 100% wet. I'm going to turn the feedback all the way down. I'm going to turn the sync off, bring the time down, and then I'm going to unlink the two. Now, when we unlink the two, for some reason, Ableton will kick the right channel back to sync, turn that back off, turn it back down. So right now, both the left and the right are being sent to your head, your ears at the same time. We're still mono. However, if we delay one, now one ear is hearing it at a different time than the other, and we've made a stereo image. I know that is not the scientifically technically correct way to describe that, but that's the easiest way for me to kind of put a mental picture. Because we still have the main signal, I'm going to offset the right side by 5, half of what I did on the left side. Now if I bring the main back in, you can see over here we're a lot wider. If we were to mute the stereo, now we're back to mono. So right now, boom, simple, we've got a little bit of width. But let's bring this width to life just a little bit more. I'm going to stick with the stereo one for now. The next step, the next thing I'm going to add to this chain, I'm going to grab an OTT from the multiband dynamics compressor. I'm going to slap that after the EQ. We don't need the low end, so I'm actually just going to turn that off, and I'm going to turn the release up to 1000 so that it just holds on 100% of the time, or infinity if this was a normal compressor. And this is what we've got. Let's mute the main. And now let's bring back some of that frequency. Put a little more high end. Good, good. Now let's mute that for a second. Bring back the main. All right, all right. Let's add them back together just to give you an idea. Kind of leveled out. That OTT is a really good addition because it does really level out. The way that OTT, the over the top, right? It really squashes that stereo, so it's bringing all the ranges of those frequencies into a nice even keel, which tends to, in my opinion, sit very nicely with that main channel. Next up, I'm going to mute the stereo again, get back to the main, and I'm going to warm that up by adding just the basic saturator, the Ableton saturator. I'm going to add it after the EQ. I don't want it 100% wet, so I'm going to bring that down to 75. I'm going to turn the soft clip on, and because we're going to be doing 6 on the drive, I'm going to reduce the output by 6 decibels. And just to kind of give an idea so that we can hear it, I'm going to turn it up, right? You can hear it start to kind of break down. I want to back off. I think about 8 sounds good, so let's bring that to 8. Now, let's add the stereo back. I like it. It's nice and full and wide. It sounds good. You can see it here, right? It's filling out the mix. A little extra step here. On the EQ, on the main, I'm going to roll off a little bit of the top. Because what I'm going to do on the stereo side is add that back. And the way that OTT works, let's do it here. Again, I'm following over here on the top left just to stay balanced. I dig it. I like it. So now, outside of our chain, let's bring the sound back together. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a compressor, the FabFilter Pro C. Great little compressor. You can see the sounds peaking a bit, so let's turn the input down a bit to get us out of that peak. I like to use the classic. They say it kind of emulates the SSL, the solid states compressors. I don't know that it does, but I like the way that the attack and the release is affected on the classic setting. I'm going to turn the ratio to 4. I'm going to bring the attack to about 20, and I'm just going to put the release on auto. And then from here, I'm just going to bring this down. Before I do, we can see the kind of the body of the sound down here. So these peaks, the big differences between them, I'm going to bring the threshold down so that we're hitting some of these lower peaks. Good. And you can see where we've reduced a bit there. And then a little gain makeup on the output. We don't want to peaks. Got a little ahead of myself there, got a little excited. Good. And now I'm going to bring another saturator on here. Again, I don't want it 100%, maybe 65, to, up to your taste on that. I'm going to add the soft clip. Let's bring the drive in. Now, I don't necessarily want the drive to be anywhere near as much as it is on the main because I don't want to start breaking the sound down. And then makeup on the other end. All right. Now, I'm going to add a couple extra steps in here. The M1 doesn't have any sort of cutoff filtering or macros that you can automate, and maybe we want this to do some things, so I'm just going to show you my full chain when it comes to something like this. The next thing I'm going to add a low pass filter, then a high pass filter, and got ahead of myself a bit. I'm going to add a utility before the low pass filter. And I'm going to group these together. And then after the fact, I'm going to put another EQ just so I can cut off the ends, the tops and bottoms, just a little frequency control. But let's go to the macros. This one, I'm just going to call this low pass. And let's call this high pass. All right, let's map, click map. Obviously the low pass will map here. The high pass filter will map here. One more thing, I'm going to click the width on the utility and I'm going to map it to the low pass. Now with that being said, you see when I did that, it kicked the width up to 400%. So you're going to have to go over to macro mapping and make the max on that width 100, its natural state, and then you can click the map button again. So now what you'll see is when I turn the low pass knob, not only will the frequency reduce, but the width will reduce as well. So check it out. I'm going to bring it all the way down. So I like to add that little extra step, the utility. Again, when I'm doing the mix down, if all of our low frequencies, in my mind, need to be in the center, and all of the high frequencies can be on the wide edges, that utility, as I cut off the high, cut off the high, cut off the high, it naturally brings everything into the center so that we're mono on a full low pass. And then, of course, the high pass side, right? And of course, I'm a little OCD, so we'll do a little color action here. We can collapse those. And then the next steps, this is obviously dry. If you remember at the beginning, I turned off the effects on the M1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little delay and a little reverb next. And I'm going to do the delay first and then the reverb so that the reverb can add a little excitement to the delay as well. I like to use the Waves hybrid delay. It's just a really simple, great sounding delay. Turn the analog off, bring it all the way dry to start. I'm going to bring the feedback down to about 45. I'll turn the ping pong on. Now as far as the filtering goes, I'm going to roll off the sound at about 4,000 hertz on the top end and 200 on the low end. And this is what it'll sound like. And I don't want it too much in the mix, maybe about 10. It's just adding a little color and a little life. And then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to add the reverb. I always start with, for whatever reason, I always start with the cathedral, but that's not what we're going to make it. I'm going to bring the pre-delay back to 5 milliseconds. I don't want it to be a whole heck of a lot. And then I'm going to bring the decay time down a little bit as well. Fully wet, just so you get the idea. Right? But obviously we don't want that much. Now, you can see I added the delay and the reverb after the low pass and the high pass. Did that on purpose because I want both of those to sound a bit more natural when the sound is cutting off. If you put them before, they get affected by that low pass or high pass, and I don't necessarily want them to be that way. So let's reset this just so we can see it. We have width. We've got some effects on there. We've got the ability to control it so we can kind of sweep it in and sweep it out in our mix if that's what we want to do. But that's it. I don't do a whole heck of a lot. I like to keep both the primary main sound as well as the stereo sound so that I get it both nice and wide on a good, nice sound system. But at the same time, if for whatever reason the sound system isn't so good, that main will kick in and still keep that sound in the mix so that you don't lose it in any sort of phasing. But yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below. If you want to check out other works of mine, you can search Original DJ Hero, all one word, on Facebook, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, Instagram, and Twitter. Good luck on your own projects, and we'll see you back here soon.